Have you ever heard of someone being the only person to survive a deadly plane crash? It sounds impossible, something straight out of a movie or a novel. But this isn't fiction, it's real. It actually happened. Just imagine you're on a plane with many others, families, friends, children laughing, strangers quietly flipping through magazines or watching movies. And then in just a few minutes, everything changes. You're the only one left alive. This is not just a story, it is the miraculous true account of Ramesh Vishwaskumar Bucharvada, a 36-year-old man from Gujarat, India, the only survivor of a horrific plane crash that stunned the entire country and left investigators, experts, and the public deeply shaken. What unfolded that day was nothing short of a nightmare, a tragedy that tore countless families apart and filled the air with sorrow and confusion. Yet in the midst of this devastation, Ramesh's survival stands out, not simply as a case of luck, but as a powerful story of hope, inner strength, and something far beyond our ability to explain. His escape from death is a mystery of fate that continues to astonish everyone who hears it, and a reminder that sometimes in the darkest moments life still finds a way to shine. Ramesh was seated in seat 11A, a window seat he always preferred because he loved watching the world from above. For him, it was just another routine journey. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. He had taken flights before, and this one seemed no different. As the aircraft smoothly took off, he relaxed, gazing out of the window, unaware that this flight would change everything. There was no warning, no hint of the horror that lay ahead. The passengers were calm. The crew moved through the aisles offering drinks and snacks, and everything felt perfectly normal. But within minutes, the unimaginable happened. Both engines suddenly failed. A loud, terrifying noise filled the cabin, and the entire aircraft began to shake violently. In an instant, the peaceful environment turned to chaos. People who were quietly enjoying the flight just moments earlier began to scream. Children cried, adults shouted in panic, and fear swept through the plane like wildfire. Inside the cockpit, the pilot and co-pilot acted swiftly. They followed emergency protocols, tried to send distress signals, attempted to restart the engines, and made every possible effort to glide the plane to safety. But none of their actions worked. The engines remained unresponsive, and the aircraft continued to lose altitude at an alarming rate. The situation worsened rapidly. Hope began to fade. People prayed, clutched their loved ones, and cried out in desperation. The once orderly cabin became filled with raw fear. Then suddenly, everything went dark. A final violent jolt shook the plane, and it crashed. When rescue teams arrived at the crash site, the scene that greeted them was beyond heartbreaking. The aircraft had been completely torn apart, its once strong body now reduced to twisted metal and shattered fragments. Wreckage and debris were scattered across a wide area, with torn seats, broken luggage, and personal belongings like children's toys, shoes, and wallets lying among the ruins. Silent reminders of lives that had been so suddenly and violently interrupted. Thick smoke rose into the sky, mixing with the pungent smell of jet fuel and burning metal, while flames still licked parts of the broken fuselage despite the efforts of firefighters trying to extinguish them. The silence that followed the crash was haunting, an eerie, heavy quietness that carried the weight of immense loss. Rescuers, though shaken by the devastation, moved quickly and methodically, scanning the wreckage for any signs of life, hoping desperately to find someone, anyone still breathing. But the reality was grim. Dozens of passengers had died on impact. There were no cries, no movement, only the stillness of tragedy. Just when hope began to fade, something extraordinary happened. Beneath a mangled section of the fuselage, rescuers found a man, badly injured but still alive. Against all odds, one person had survived. That man was Ramesh Vishwaskumar Bucharvada. He lay motionless beneath the twisted remains of the aircraft, unconscious and barely visible under metal, wires, and dust. His body was in a terrible state, covered in blood and bruises, with his legs pinned under debris and several bones broken. Yet in the midst of all that destruction, his heart was still beating. Rescuers moved quickly, carefully freeing him from the wreckage and rushing him to the nearest medical facility. He was admitted to the hospital in critical condition and placed under intensive care, his life hanging by a thread. Doctors were stunned. They had followed the news, seen the scale of the disaster, and couldn't understand how one man had made it out alive when no one else had. Some believed it was pure luck, a miracle, a 1 in a million survival. Others suggested that the position of his seat, 11A, which was over the wing and closer to the center of the aircraft, might have provided more structural protection during the impact. There was also a detail many couldn't ignore. Ramesh had kept his seatbelt fastened tightly, a small but vital decision that could have minimized the shock his body endured when the plane went down. But beyond technical explanations, there was something more powerful, the will to live, a force that no science can measure. Ramesh had survived not just through circumstances, but perhaps because of something deeper, the strength of the human spirit. After the crash, he remained unconscious for hours, his body in deep shock. When he finally regained consciousness, surrounded by beeping machines, unfamiliar faces, and hospital walls, he was dazed and confused. His memories were blurred, bits and pieces of chaos, screams, and the violent shaking of the aircraft. And when the truth was gently told to him, when he learned that everyone else on that plane had died, he couldn't hold back. He broke down, overwhelmed by the weight of survival. Ramesh had seen those people on the plane. He had heard their voices, maybe exchanged a smile or a nod, shared brief quiet moments with strangers who, like him, never imagined it would be their last flight. Now he is the only one left. The emotional pain he carries runs far deeper than his physical injuries. Though his body was broken in the crash, it's his heart that bears the unimaginable weight of those lost lives. Ramesh is not a celebrity. He's not wealthy, not an athlete, not someone used to attention. He is a simple, hard-working man from Gujarat, known in his neighborhood for being soft-spoken, kind, and humble. The kind of man who would start his day early, go to work, and come home with a bag of groceries and a smile on his face. Before the crash, his life was filled with routine and small joys, just like many of us. But that life, that normal, peaceful rhythm, has changed forever. Since the crash, Ramesh has been in the hospital, undergoing treatment, therapy, and long hours of recovery. His body is slowly healing, each day bringing small improvements, a little more movement, a little more strength, but the deeper wounds, the ones inside his heart and mind, will take much longer to mend. These are the kinds of wounds that don't bleed but silently ache, always present. He hasn't returned home. That house, once filled with comfort and routine, now feels distant, not just in miles, but in memory. He hasn't spoken publicly, despite the calls, the questions, and the attention. He hasn't returned to work. Normal life feels unreachable now, as though it belonged to someone else. He hasn't told his full story, not yet, but in rare, quiet conversations with his family, he has begun to open up. He talks about the crash, what he saw, what he felt, and those final moments that still live vividly in his mind, moments he will never forget. People across India and even from abroad have begun calling him the Miracle Man, the lone survivor of a devastating crash, a symbol of both human resilience and what many believe to be divine intervention. But Ramesh doesn't see himself as a hero. He doesn't feel strong or extraordinary. Instead, he feels lucky and deeply burdened. In quiet moments, he asks the same haunting questions over and over. Why did it happen? Why did all the other passengers die? Why only me? These are questions that swirl endlessly in his mind, questions no one has the answers to. His family remains by his side around the clock, holding his hand, feeding him, gently helping him sit up, and trying to bring him comfort. They say he sometimes wakes in the night crying, struggling to breathe, reliving the horror in his dreams. At times he just sits silently, staring off into the distance with a blank expression, as if watching images that no one else can see, images burned into his memory from those final moments before the crash. Meanwhile, authorities have launched a full investigation into the tragedy. The black box, a vital piece of equipment that records both flight data and cockpit conversations, has been recovered from the wreckage. Experts are now going through every detail, every second of the flight, in search of answers. They are examining whether a technical malfunction went unnoticed, whether there was human error from the cockpit, or if weather played a role. And there's always the terrifying possibility that something entirely unexpected occurred, something no system could have predicted. As the investigation unfolds, only one man truly knows what it felt like inside that aircraft as it plunged toward the ground, and even he is still trying to process it all. In the aftermath, airline companies nationwide have begun reassessing their safety procedures, reviewing emergency systems, and facing new pressure from concerned passengers. The crash has reignited fear among travelers, especially families, who now wonder if air travel is as safe as they were told. Across news platforms and social media, one question dominates the conversation: are our skies really safe anymore? Aviation authorities have come under intense pressure to strengthen their systems, with calls to tighten inspections, enhance pilot training, and invest in more advanced safety technologies. Flight operators are now facing serious scrutiny, and their safety records are being re-examined in detail. In the midst of this, many grieving families who lost loved ones in the crash are stepping forward, demanding answers and accountability. They are determined to ensure that such a tragedy never repeats itself. The entire aviation sector is now under a magnifying glass, and rightfully so, because lives were lost and questions remain unanswered. Yet beyond the official investigations and search for blame, the grief is raw and real. Dozens of families are living through unimaginable loss: mothers, fathers, young children, newlyweds, elderly parents, all gone in the blink of an eye. There was no warning, no final goodbye. What was meant to be just another flight turned, without mercy, into a nightmare that shattered lives forever. And standing quietly amidst all this sorrow is Ramesh, not just the only survivor, but a living memory of everyone who was on that plane. He carries his own physical and emotional pain, but he also carries something even heavier: the memories of those who didn't make it. He remembers their faces, their voices, their small gestures, the silent moments shared among strangers who never imagined their journey would end like this. Even in his silence, even in his suffering, Ramesh has become a symbol of hope. His survival speaks to something deeper, a message that even in the darkest of times, even when everything seems lost, one flicker of light can still endure. And that light is Ramesh. He doesn't seek fame or recognition. He doesn't speak much, but just by being alive, by continuing to breathe and heal, he tells the world a powerful truth: the human spirit can survive the unthinkable. He doesn't seek interviews or recognition. He has no interest in awards, magazine covers, or appearing on television. All Ramesh wants is to heal, to return home, be with his family, and live the quiet, ordinary life he once had. But regardless of whether he ever chooses to speak publicly, whether he writes a book, or remains forever silent, his story is already speaking to countless hearts. It reminds us of the fragility of life, the unpredictability of fate, and the quiet power of endurance. As we reflect on this tragedy, let us never forget those who lost their lives. Their dreams, their families, their laughter and love, they all mattered, and they continue to matter. Their memory lives on, not just in names or news reports, but in the hearts of those who remember and honor them. Alongside that remembrance, let us stand with Ramesh, the man who survived, the man whose very breath reminds us that even in the darkest moments, life can hold on. That even when everything breaks, someone may still rise, quietly, carrying the story of all those who could not. If this story moved you, show your support. Like the video, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts below. Leave a message for Ramesh if you feel inspired. He may never see it, or maybe one day he will. Either way, your words carry meaning. Thank you for being here. Stay strong, stay safe, and always remember, life is truly precious,